Bienvenidos, señoras y señores, to another episode of the Bleed Lows podcast. This episode of the Bleed Lows podcast is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline is your number one source for all your betting needs. Get the latest odds and lines and the latest matchup reports. BetOnline is your sports intel headquarters this season, as we have you covered on all your insider sports wagering needs, from MLB, UFC, and boxing. It's the fastest and easiest way to get your betting info, including live betting options, and your favorite casino and card games are available to play right from your home. So get into the action today, head to the website or use your mobile device to join, and be sure to use our promo code BELIEVE, B-L-E-A-V, to receive your 50% bonus on your first deposit. Bet online, where the game starts. And joining us on the Carne Asada for the very first time is the Angels beat writer for the Orange County Register, Jeff Fletcher. He is also the author of Showtime, not the Lakers, but Showtime, the inside story of Shohei Ohtani and the greatest baseball season ever played. Jeff, ¿cómo estás? Bienvenido. Welcome.
Gracias.
There we go. There you go, Jeff. You get the show now. You get the show. We're gonna teach you Spanish. Jeff, we wanted to have you on the show because the Freeway Series is going to be starting on Tuesday, and we want to get a preview. And it seems like the Dodgers are going to get the Angels at the wrong time right now, because it looks like the Angels are playing really, really well. All of a sudden, they're one game out of the wild card spot. They're only 4.5 games out of first. What did they do to turn around their season, or am I completely wrong? Because at the beginning of the season, it looked like it was the same old with the Angels.
They've never really been that bad at any point this year. I think they pretty much were 500 for first 2 months. They maybe were one game below. They never really looked bad, but they had really been off and really played well until about the last 10 days. And, it's just been a combination of they played the Cubs, who are not very good. They played the Mariners, who are sort of like them. They're kind of a team that could be better, but has not played up to their capability. And then this week they played the Rangers, who are obviously one of the best teams in baseball this year. And they won 3 out of 4 in Texas. So that is a real I think the difference there was basically the Rangers don't have a very good bullpen, and the Angels suddenly do have a very good bullpen. So the Angels were able to keep those games late, and they just outpitched the Rangers late in those games, and that's how they won them. So right now their offense is doing pretty well, although they got some injuries that are just, as we speak, starting to hit them. And their bullpen has been very good. Their rotation has been not so good, but that's kind of where they are right now.
So you had mentioned the injuries, and it seems like Anthony Rendon again is going on the IL.
Well, as we sit here today on Friday morning, he had an X-ray last night, and we don't know the results of it yet. He got hit by a pitch in the game last night, and he was able to stay in the game because he played defense. Basically, could not swing the bat. So times he came up, he just stood there and watched 3 strikes go by. But they were ahead, so they said it's fine. We'll go for his defense. But we'll see. I would not be surprised if he does have to go on the IL. But as we're speaking right now, I don't know if that's happening for sure.
Is that guy getting a bad rap from the fans? Because it just seems, he can't help it. He's just been injury plagued since the Angels signed him, right?
Yeah, it's been pretty bad, the injuries he's had. He's definitely provides some value when he's there, even though it's not like the 2019 Nationals kind of value where he was, in the MVP running. Actually, 2020, the shortened season with the Angels, he finished, I think, 9th in the MVP that year. So shortened season, not the same, but he did everything you could expect then. But then 21 and 22, he was hurt for more than half of both those seasons. And 23, he already missed about a month. So the Angels have played pretty well when he's in there. I think he definitely adds something. He has really good at bats that they say, bleeds over to the rest of the team. Guys watch that and they see what he makes the pitchers do, and it helps the rest of them. It's hard for me to understand how it's true because, watch a video of him, when he's not there. You should be able to figure it out. But the results are that they are a much better hitting team when he's in the lineup. Even the other players hit better when he's in the lineup. So that's the fact. I can't explain it, but that is what's happened so far.
So going into the season, I don't think they were worried about the offense, right? I think the big question marks were like, had you had mentioned the starting pitching, did they expect the bullpen to be this good?
Well, last year they had a terrible offense, which was mostly because they had guys get hurt and they had no replacements for them. Basically, Rendon, like we said, missed a lot of the year, and they used like 10 different guys to play third in his place, and like 5 of those guys got released. So they were just like passing through and get out of here. So, and they had other problems, once they traded Brandon Marsh, they didn't really have anybody in the outfield, and Jared Walsh got hurt, and they didn't really have anybody at first base, so they just had all these holes in their lineup. So a lot of times they were putting out a lineup with like 4 or 5 big league hitters. It's really hard to produce. So this year they added Hunter Renfroe, Gio Urshela, and Brandon Drury. And Urshela and Drury in particular are guys that can play multiple positions. So they figured they can have extra pieces if anybody's hurt, like we've seen with Rendon, to fill in for them. And that's really been one of the biggest differences, is that they're now, no offense to guys like Jack Mayfield and Phil Gosselin, who were out there last year, but it's much better to have Brandon Drury and Gio Urshela as your backup guys. So that's been better. Pitching-wise, last year the rotation was really good. The rotation ranked 6th in the majors in ERA last year. This year it's been a big disappointment. Just really none of the pitchers has been as good as they were last year, including Ohtani. And they're really going to stay in the year and get into the playoffs. Those guys need to improve. And the bullpen last year was kind of middle of the road, and this year it started out really bad, and then it's gotten really good. So I don't know. It'll probably end up still middle of the road. Who knows? But that's kind of where they are.
The Dodgers are going through it right now with their bullpen. And I've always posed the question that if you're a front office, can you factor in for regression or what's not on paper, right? Every year they expect these guys to do the same thing that they do every year, but sometimes that doesn't happen. Is that something that every front office, do they factor that in saying, well, what do we do if we get underperformance?
Yeah, I mean, I think that bullpens are incredibly difficult to predict just by the nature of the fact that if these guys were really consistently good, they would be starters. You're dealing with guys who are sort of the second tier of pitchers to begin with, and then it's also a really small sample size. So if a guy is bad for 10 straight innings, that is a 6th season or whatever. Whereas if a starter's bad for 10 straight innings, it's 2 games and whatever. It goes away. That I think is a problem. And I had a GM once tell me the best way to have a really good bullpen is to have a really bad bullpen one year and bring back all the exact same pitchers the next year, because that's just how they are. They're up and down. And it works the other way too. If you have a really good bullpen and you try to bring back everybody and expect everybody to reproduce what they did, it's not going to work. So, Angels bullpen was in April, and in June it's been in baseball. So who knows?
So where the Angels are at right now, is this what Perry Maniason was expecting? Did they expect that they would be competitive and they'd be up there with, I don't know if anybody saw the Rangers playing the way they were playing in this division, but at least competing with the Astros.
Well, that was the plan. I mean, they're not in a rebuilding mode at all. When you've got Mike Trout and you got Shohei Ohtani in the last year of his contract, there was nothing about the Angels that was like, oh, let's look at 2024, 2025. They needed to win this year. And, I don't know how certain they could be that they were going to do it, but they felt like they'd made improvements. I think if you told them at the beginning of the season that their record, as we sit here, would be 39-32, they would probably say, yeah, that sounds about. I think if you told them how they got to that record, they would be very surprised because, like I said, it's been kind of backward what expected. But I think the overall level that they played at is what they were counting on.
So if, let's say, the question now is obviously if they're competitive, they're one game out of the wild card spot. There's no way they're trading Shohei Ohtani. Now, this was a question that obviously they were going to have to deal with one way or another going into this season, right? And Artie Moreno the other day just came out and said that, they're going to make every effort to try to re-sign Shohei Ohtani. If things go completely left on them right now and the wheels go completely off the wagon, do they contemplate trading Ohtani, or is that just not an issue at all? And what's the point of talking about this?
I mean, for the next month, and they're like 6 games out of a wild spot line, and there's 3 other teams in front of them. I think maybe they think about it, but even then, I think that they want to re-sign him, and they feel like if they trade him, they're not going to be able to re-sign. Now, it may be really hard to re-sign him if you're terrible, because he doesn't want to re-sign with a team that's would be on its way to its whatever 9th straight losing season. So, obviously there's a chance of them trading him, but just based on the way they've played right now, and I still think if you look at their whole roster, there's a lot more guys who have underperformed than overperformed, and they're in the race. So I don't see them really falling hopelessly out of it. Maybe they hit a little slump, and instead of being 1 game back, they're 3 games back. But I don't think they would trade him in that circumstance.
How is this offseason going to look? Not just only for the Angels, but all of Major League Baseball. You just mentioned something that I think was surprising to people, but I think it's something you're going to have to consider if you're going to offer this guy a contract. He's not pitching as well as he pitched last year. And the question I've always wondered is, how much longer can this guy keep this up? We haven't seen anybody do this. So if you're going to throw $600 million at a guy because he can pitch and hit, but what if all of a sudden you only get 1 year of pitching?
That's a great question. Nobody knows the answer to that. And nobody has ever done this before. I actually feel like Ohtani gets sort of underrated and overrated at the same time. And when I say underrated, I look at like last year when Aaron Judge won the MVP, and people went all gaga about what Aaron Judge did, and they didn't consider the fact that Aaron Judge had a great offensive season. Other players have had great offensive seasons. Nobody does what Shohei Ohtani does. It's absolutely incredible, and every year that he does it, at that level at least, not just like a middling one or the other, but really good at both, he should be the MVP. It's just the way it is. So people underrate him in that sense. But then also when you look at like what you expect from him in the future, they kind of overrate him, because this is not just a guarantee that he's going to do it every year. This is really, really hard to do. His first 3 years in the big leagues, he did not do it. So I don't think you can just say, oh, look, we signed Ohtani. We're going to get, one of the best pitchers and one of the best hitters for 10 years. I just don't know that you can do that. So it's going to be super, super interesting to see what team gets him. And I think there's a significant risk that whatever team gets him and pays him $500 million, $600 million is not going to get this guy for the whole term of that contract. I mean, I think that's true with any free agent, but, especially with him, there's a little bit of risk. The upside is so high, and there's other ways that he makes money for your organization, kind of balance that a little bit. So the bottom line is I think it's going to be a super interesting situation.
You bring up a very good point, and I think we do lose sight of the fact that the first 3 years he wasn't doing what everybody expected him to do. Another thing that I find really interesting, and I think you had mentioned this before also, is his availability. If you're going to pay somebody that amount of money, and you mentioned you make money in other ways off of him, can you put the demands, hey, we need you to be more available? And I just don't mean about playing, but being available to talk to the media, to interact with the community. Now, is that something that's under consideration, or you just can't broach that with him because he's got all the leverage?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely going to be something that's going to be talked about with his next team, because he has a pretty unique situation with the Angels where his responsibilities beyond playing baseball are minimal. He doesn't do a whole lot of interviews. He doesn't do, community events and that kind of thing. He's a great ambassador for the game, just in terms of what he does, and, playing the game. But he doesn't do a lot of stuff beyond that, which is understandable because he's got a lot on his plate to do what he does. So he knows how that works with the Angels. They've had kind of years to work out this agreement. Not that there's any formal agreement, but years to work out like how it's going to go. And I think if he goes to any other environment, it's going to be a question like, how is it going to work? And will it be the same? Will it be a little different? Will Ohtani try to make it different on his end? Will it affect his performance? All those are unknowns. So I think it's going to be really interesting to see if he goes to another environment, like how all of that changes, if it does.
The season started off, I think, in a very peculiar way for the Angels because there was all that drama with Artie's going to sell the team. And then all of a sudden, Artie says he's not going to sell the team. And we had the situation in Oakland with the fans there losing their team. But I remember seeing the Angels fans being so happy when they announced that Artie Moreno was going to sell the team. And now all of a sudden it's like, oh, he's not selling the team. I mean, what's the energy level like down there in Anaheim? I mean, are the fans into this or do they just show up whenever Ohtani pitches?
Well, when the team's winning, they're into it. When they're losing, they're very frustrated. They've been very frustrated for a long time now. They really hope there would be a change in ownership because, right or wrong, they blame Artie for a lot of what's gone wrong, and he is responsible for some of it, not all of it. But, and I think that they wanted to just see something different. Even though they didn't know who the new owner was going to be, they just thought, it'll be something different, and we'll have a different direction. The direction we're in, they didn't like. So then once Artie said he was going to be back, there was a lot of frustration with that. I think that if the Angels can continue to play well this year and say they make some trades and add some more payroll at the deadline and they get into the playoffs and they at least make a pretty good offer to keep Ohtani and all that stuff happens, then I think that they would have much better feelings about him. But as of now, they still are very skeptical of him, and they don't think that the team can win with him running things as he has. So I think that they're still just kind of keeping an eye on that.
Wow. Give us an update on Mike Trout. I feel like Mike Trout has become the forgotten man in baseball. And that to me is like, but this guy is the best baseball player in baseball. But now I'm wondering, is he the best baseball player in baseball? I mean, we haven't heard much about him. We don't see him much because he's not in the playoffs. What's going on with Mike Trout?
Well, he's having the worst year of his career. And I've always said that the difference between Mike Trout and all the other, superstar level players is that Mike Trout never has a bad year. You even look at, the other guys who win MVPs would still regress and have a bad year once in a while, and they would come back. And that never happened to Mike Trout until now. This year, he's been in a slump for about 6 weeks. His OPS is down to maybe 820, 830, something like that. He's never had a season where his OPS was under 900. And he's had a lot where it's been 1,000. So that's the level he's always been at. We ask him what's wrong, and he just says, he's just not feeling right, and his timing's not there. He's not recognizing pitches. Physically, he's fine. He says he's fine. They're giving him some days off, so he's not had any back problems like he had last year. So it could just be some mechanical thing that he's going to have to fix. I don't think anybody's given up on him and thinks that this is it for him. Everybody's still kind of expecting that one of these weeks it's just going to click and he's going to go back to being awesome Mike Trout. But right now he's definitely not.
You know what, Jeff? You're making me feel a lot better. I was really worried about the Dodgers going into the series against the Angels because I just saw the Angels are hot. They took 3 or 4 out of the Rangers, of course, and with the Dodgers bullpen problems, this is going to be a mess. But to hear you say now that Ohtani's not pitching as well as he did last year, Mike Trout is having the worst season out of his career, hey, maybe the Dodgers can salvage a game on here. But, Jeff, you're there. When the Dodgers go down to Anaheim, I see a lot of Dodger fans in the stands. And there's always this question of, is this a rivalry? We get this, are the Dodgers and the Show Pods a rivalry and all that stuff. But what is this relationship between the Dodgers and the Angels? Is it just one-sided? Because I know Angel fans hate the Dodgers.
I think that's probably true. I think that the Angel fans get more pleasure out of beating the Dodgers than Dodgers fans do of beating the Angels. And I think that's just the way the relationship is. The Dodgers have kind of been the big brother. You know, they've been the more successful team. They're the more traditional franchise. They have a bigger fan base. So, when you go to Angels games in Anaheim, it's very split. I don't know if it's necessarily 50-50, but there's a big chunk of Dodger fans there. And, the games are very exciting because somebody's cheering for every single thing that happens. When the two teams play at Dodger Stadium, it's, more like 80-20 probably with Dodger fans. But still, there's still some excitement there. And I think all rivalries are really fan-driven. For the rivalries for players, the teams that you play a lot and teams that you're fighting with in your division. So, I'm sure if you ask the Dodgers, to the players, like when they play the Padres, is a much bigger deal than, their 4 games a year against the Angels. Yeah, this before we go is
sure.
My book, Ohtani, is a Showtime, the inside story of Shohei Ohtani and the greatest baseball season ever played. And it kind of tells you the whole baseball journey for Ohtani through Japan and getting to the Angels and the bad years of the Angels and then the MVP season. And I think it's a good read for anybody who wants to catch up on him, including people who are fans of other teams that may or may not have Ohtani in the future. So I'm sure that includes a lot of your listeners. So anyway, if that ever gets to that point, they'll want to read the book.
Do you have a couple more minutes to get into the book real quick?
Yeah.
Or do you got to go?
No, so I'll talk about the book anytime.
All right, perfect. So how has that experience been for you in terms of the research? Because from what I've heard is this guy's really difficult, not only just to get access to, but just to understand his thinking, because he doesn't think like a traditional Japanese player. Am I right on that?
Well, it's just hard to understand his thinking because he doesn't really talk about it. He doesn't really give you insight as to what he thinks or believes or wants. So you mainly have to go by looking at what he's done and sort of extrapolate from there. And so that's what I've done in the book. And there's a lot of stories in there about like when he was young in Japan and like he made lists of his goals and that kind of thing. You can kind of get a picture of what he's like. It tells you how like committed he was to baseball, even from a young age. And, I talk to him once a week, basically, when he pitches, and we get a little snippet of him every time then. So when you add all that together, you start to get a picture of who he is. But it is very difficult because he's not just going to sit down and tell you about his feelings or anything like that.
And you always have to go through a translator, right?
Yeah.
So is
that
there
adds a whole other layer too? Yeah.
Right. Is there something lost in the translation? Do you feel sometimes when you're talking to him?
Yeah, I'm sure there is. I don't think that that's intentional necessarily. I just think it's really difficult to do. I always say that if I had to listen to somebody else speaking English and then I had to repeat everything that he said in English to a third party, I would forget stuff or change things, or just because it's really hard to do. And let alone if you're translating it from another language. So I think that that's just kind of a natural part of when you're communicating that way, is that things get sometimes lost or misunderstood.
When you're putting that book together, what is the most challenging aspect of that book? I'm assuming you're outlining, right? But when you're doing your research, do you find all of a sudden, oh, now I got to go in a different direction? I wanted to go this way, but everything I'm hearing is telling me to go somewhere else.
Well, I had pretty much knew the direction of the book before I started it, just because I had been covering Ohtani for 4 years at the time that I started writing the book. So I knew a lot about what he was and what he'd done in baseball. And so I kind of knew where the path was going to take me. And it was just a matter of filling in those holes to get there. So for the most part, there weren't really surprises. It was when I was researching his life in Japan is where I really learned the most because I obviously wasn't there for that stuff. But it's all in there now.
So when you saw him at the WBC and you had that great classic moment with him facing Trout, and he clearly was the leader of Team Japan. Is that the same experience that you felt like when he was in Japan from the research that you've done, that he was the man and he knew how to deal with it and he never shied away from that moment?
Yeah, I mean, I think he's obviously been the best player on his team. All those years he was in Japan, or at least the last few, and they did win a championship with him over there in 2016. But I think that the WBC was still a higher level than even winning the Japan series because he was representing his country and he was doing it after a very frustrating 5 years in the major leagues of not really having that experience. When he won the Japan series in Japan in 2016, that was like his fourth year there. So, and he was still, 21, 22 years old. So it probably didn't mean the same. He probably figured, oh, I'm just going to do this all the time. But now go to the United States, 5 years being on a losing team. Now you go back, you put on your country's colors, and you have a chance to win a championship against a much better team than any team that he would have beaten in the Japan series. I'm sure that was a much bigger deal to him.
So, being that our sponsor is Bet Online, I have to ask you, Jeff, being a betting man, who do you think you see him with next year?
Well, this is my standard answer that I give everybody, not just because I'm here, but I say 40% chance Dodgers, 30% chance Angels, probably 25% some combination of Mariners, Giants, Padres, Mets, and then like 5% everybody else. I'd be pretty surprised with everybody else.
I love that answer. I love that you broke it down into percentages because
I've thought about this a lot, trust me.
You get this question all the time, don't you, Jeff?
Yes.
Real quick, last one I want to ask you is the samurai helmet, the home run celebration. Do we know where that came from? Did that come from Ohtani?
Oh, yeah. It was Ohtani's idea. He paid for the thing. I think it cost like $700 or something like that. So, or maybe more. I don't remember. But it was not a cheap hat. And but it was Ohtani's idea, and he brought it in, and they have a lot of fun with it.
We keep hearing he has a really good relationship with his teammates, doesn't he?
Well, see, that is the thing also that I would caution people about, because I think that from outside, there's this perception that Ohtani is just so mad that the Angels haven't won that he just sits and mopes around and like watches the highlights of winning teams and just like is begging to get out. And that is not true at all. He loves his teammates. He has a great time there. When they do win, he's like in the middle of everything. They have a lot of fun together. We just saw this series against the Rangers, which is basically as close as he's come to the playoffs with the Angels, a big mid-season series against a first-place team to show what you're made of, and they won 3 out of 4 games, and he was huge in that series. He had 4 homers, and he was leading the charge, and he said that everybody's all fired up. So, I mean, I think if the Angels could give him just a little of that, that kind of feeling, that he would really want to stay. So I don't think it's by any means this foregone conclusion that he's just counting the days to get out because they have not won so far. I think he really wants to win with the Angels. And if that doesn't happen, then I think that opens it up to other people.
And there you have it. We want to be respectful of your time, Jeff. We want to thank you for coming on. But being that this is your first time on the show, we got to hit you with our rapid fire questions. So we call these our kickback questions. If you have a longer answer, by all means, go into it. But they're meant to be quick. So first one though, with the Rangers being surprising, the Astros are the Astros. It seems like the Mariners are the most disappointing team in that division right now. Do you think the Angels stay in this and are fighting for a playoff spot come September?
I do. I think they're certainly going to be fighting for a playoff spot. I don't know if they're going to end up making it because there's other good teams. They're fighting with the Yankees and the Blue Jays are going to be all in that mix for the wild card. So they should definitely be in it.
We just found out recently that we are the number one baseball podcast in Armenia, Jeff. So we need to know, have you been to Armenia?
I have not.
All right. So we're still trying to understand why we're so popular in Armenia. So we'll go ahead and see what that quest is like. Next one, we are also big fans of the male soap opera on this show, which is wrestling. Have you ever, at one point in your life, going back to your childhood, been a fan of wrestling? Or do you poo-poo it? Are you above it, Jeff?
Never. I don't understand the appeal of it, but I guess a lot of people do like it.
It's for Neanderthals, right, Jeff?
I didn't say that, but not for me.
And last one, we are all about the cultura here. So that means for us, it's tacos. We love tacos. So you're in Southern California. There's no better place for tacos. What is your favorite taco, and where do you go to get that taco?
I used to live in San Clay, and there was a place called Pedro's Tacos down there. It was very good. There were two locations. It wasn't a chain or anything, but they had really good ones, and they were gigantic. So normally you'd go think, oh, I'm going to get 2 or 3 tacos. Well, that's a lot of tacos. So, but they're very good.
And what kind of taco was it? Is it a fish taco down there in San Clemente, or was it other protein?
Fish tacos, yeah. I think I would get them with shrimp sometimes.
Oh, but, okay.
They're very good.
And there you have it. So we want to thank Jeff Fletcher, ladies and gentlemen, the Orange County Register. He's the beat writer for the Angels. Thanks for letting us, for coming on the show and giving us the lowdown on the Angels. As I said, I was really worried going into the series, and I'm one of those Dodger fans that hates losing to the Angels. So I was, and only because I'm going to hear it from Angel fan. It's exactly what you just described. They're never going to let up. They win, a couple of games against the Dodgers, but I feel more comfortable now, Jeff. So to our listeners, our viewers, Jeff is obviously the expert on Shohei Ohtani. So if you guys want to know everything about Shohei Ohtani, you guys want to prepare yourselves for the offseason, which is going to be nuts. Get the book. Again, the book is called Showtime, the inside story of Shohei Ohtani and the greatest baseball season ever played. Now, is this book available everywhere, or where can they specifically get the book, Jeff?
Amazon's probably the easiest way, but it's at Barnes & Noble. You can go, if you check Barnes & Noble's website, you can see which stores it's available at, but you can also order it online from there too. So you can just Google the name of the book and it'll show up wherever you want to buy it.
So you mean we can't go to bookstores anymore, Jeff, and just, go through up and down the aisles?
You can find a Barnes & Noble. There's probably a copy in there.
Okay, that's great. And where can our listeners, our viewers, people randomly now Angel fans who are tuning in because you're on, where can they follow you to get all the information?
Jeff Fletcher OCR on Twitter, and that's basically we'll give you everything I know or links to all the stories that I write. So if you follow me there, you'll know everything that I have to report.
Thank you very much, Jeff. We appreciate you giving us the time.
Gracias.
There we go. I love it. And a big thank you once again to Jeff Fletcher. I appreciate Jeff working on his Espanol there at the end. So a lot to take there, babyface. I got to tell you, I'm really now second guessing my picks because I thought the Angels were legitimately playing well, but now the way Jeff makes it seems like all they did was just beat up on bad teams. However, they did take 3 out of 4 from the Rangers. So I don't know. That is a sign. What was your biggest takeaway from what Jeff had to share about the Angels?
Well, I wasn't aware of the season Trout's having, right? Because, Trout, he's been the best player in baseball, right? But you never really hear that much of Mike Trout, right? It's just kind of like, he's there and he's doing this thing year in and year out. But I wasn't aware that he was having a down year. I had to look up his stats this year, and he's hitting 248. He's a career 300 hitter. So that's a little surprising. Like, what do you attribute that to? Was it WBC? Is it just that time in his career? Are we going to start seeing that downward trend on Mike Trout now? What is it?
That is a very good question. How old is Mike Trout now? And how many seasons is this now for Mike Trout? Because what Mike Trout was doing was historic, okay? I mean, I would hear this all the time, right? In terms of Mike Trout, this is what it was probably what it looked like to see Mickey Mantle play, right? And I think we took Mike Trout for granted. I think it's just one of those things where you sit there and you just automatically say Mike Trout is the best baseball player. But he's been doing this for a while now. How many years is he in now, Babyface?
Well, he's going to be 33, and he's been in since 12 with his first full season. So he's into his 11th year.
Yeah. Well, you know what? I have to say, I mean, if he's 33 years old, this may be.
Sorry, he's going to be 32. Yes. So
he's going to be 32. Yeah. So technically, I think that's still his prime. I mean, it might be towards the end of his prime, but I mean, he might bounce back. I mean, he might. Jeff said he was in a slump. It's been 6 weeks now. He might snap out of it, and by the end of the year, he might have your typical Mike Trout year.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at his last 30 games, he's hitting 196 in that time. On base at 331, a slug at 374. So yeah, I mean, he's been in that slump for a bit.
So I mean, it's interesting because I just feel like the Dodgers, whenever the Dodgers go to Anaheim, things never go well. I think there might have been one season where they swept them. Oh, I think it was during the pandemic year. They almost like won every game against the Angels that year. But other than that, I always feel like they struggle down there. And I hate losing to the Angels. And it's because of what Jeff said. It's Angel fan. I mean, where do you stand on that? When I asked Jeff, is this a rivalry? Who does this mean more to? I do feel like it means more to Angel fans. So that's why when we lose to Angel fan, it's like, oh, shut up, man. I don't want to hear it.
Yeah, and I think growing up, like the Angels were just like another team. Like, yeah, I'd see the Angels on TV and like, hey, cool for the Angels, whatever. You know, I'd watch them, you know, back in what was that year? The Don Baylor home run. What was that? 82 or something like that, right? With the Red Sox when they were close to going to the World Series. Right, so I mean, I was rooting for the Angels as a kid. I'm like, hey, yeah, Angels, cool, like, and but yeah,
I think it was Dave Henderson, wasn't Dave? Henderson?
Yeah, the Dave Henderson home run, with the Red Sox, yeah.
I thought you were talking about Don Baylor because he played for the Angels, back in '82, but you're talking about the '86.
Yeah, '86. Yeah, I mean, I remember all those guys: Don Baylor, Brian Downing, right? All these guys that the Angels had, right? Like, I mean, I've always been a fan of baseball, right? So, especially local teams, I was always a big fan of. But like, yeah, once they got to the World Series 2002, right? I was rooting for them to win. Obviously, they're playing the Giants, right? But not just because of the rivalry, right? I legitimately want, hey, Angels are in the World Series. That's cool. I want them to win, right? But once that happened, once they won that World Series, that's when Angel fans completely flipped. Like, oh, you know, we won a World Series. When's the last time you guys won a World Series? Blah blah blah. But now they're past 20 years now too, right? So like, you know, they can't really talk much now anymore. But I think that's when they kind of flipped, like now, like, hey, we won a World Series, like, and I think that's when it all changed.
Dude, that World Series was the worst. It was I wanted the World Series to be canceled. I couldn't root for it either. I couldn't root for the Angels. I absolutely could not root for the Angels, and I wasn't going to root for the Giants. And usually, when it comes to the World Series, I'm always rooting for whoever is coming out of the National League. If it's the Dodgers aren't there, I'm rooting for the National League team. But that World Series was horrible. It was the worst World Series ever. I was just like, can't we have another earthquake? Can we just like postpone it? I hate seeing this. But it is interesting. Obviously, the main reason we wanted to have Jeff on is we wanted to talk Ohtani, right? Because this is the Shohei Ohtani show. We want to see Ohtani as a Dodger. But I like how he broke it down into percentages at the end. After hearing what Jeff has to say about Ohtani, do you feel more confident or less confident that the Dodgers will have a chance at signing him? Or do you, let me add, and that two-parter, do you think he's going to leave the Angels?
I mean, I think he's leaving the Angels for sure. I mean, that's like a given. Interesting, right? He had what's it, Dodgers at 40%. He had him as the highest team, right? So that makes me a little weary when when
Yes,
when a lot of people are like saying, yeah, Dodgers, and a lot of people are saying that, yeah, it's going to be probably the Dodgers. It's going to be probably that makes me a little weird. Like, then he's going to go somewhere else, right? I don't know if they just do that maybe to like, yeah, everybody's saying I'm going to the Dodgers. I'm gonna go somewhere else, right? Just to spite everybody, right? So that makes me a little weary, but I mean, it is interesting that a lot of people are picking the Dodgers.
Do you think people are just picking the Dodgers because of the money? Because the Dodgers are the ones they can pay him what Shohei wants. I mean, the Yankees got a lot of money. I mean, why aren't people talking about like because he said in second with 30%? Am I hearing or did I hear this incorrectly? Didn't he say the Angels at 30%?
I think said the Angels, yeah. I mean, Artie Moreno said, he's willing to do whatever it takes. I mean, I don't know if he's going to open up his checkbook and drop, 600, 700 million on him. I mean, I don't know how big his checkbook is, but I mean, it is interesting. I mean, a lot of stuff like New York, obviously Cohen, he can give the guy a blank check, right?
Right.
I mean, but a lot of people seem to think maybe he doesn't want to play in New York, right? I mean, I think the Dodger thing is because Dodgers were in on him right before he went to the Angels, and I remember that one of the big sticking points was there's no DH, right? Dodgers couldn't offer him a DH spot, so what was he going to do? And I think he's still in California. He's still in the general vicinity of where Anaheim was. He's going to be in LA. The Dodgers do have a relationship, right, with Japanese players, a reputation going back, with like guys like Nomo, right? So, I think for that makes it really viable for me, and I think, especially like if the Dodgers don't win this year, right? And then they sign Shohei Ohtani and he comes over and they win, right? I think that's going to be huge for him, right? Like, hey,
oh yeah,
I'm here, now we won the World Series, So, and I think that's true for anywhere that he goes, right? If you go to Seattle, right, and he makes a difference there, right? So I think that's something you got to look at.
Well, that's what our friend of the Carne Asada, Dylan Hernandez, has always said, that Ohtani is about his legacy. And part of his legacy is going to be he's the guy who came and put whatever team over the top. Now, let me ask you this. If the Dodgers end up winning the World Series this year, does that hurt their chances in signing Ohtani? Is Ohtani going to sit there and look at it and go, you know what? Yeah, maybe you guys are offering the most money, but you guys just won the World Series. I want to go somewhere where someone's going to put up a statue of me. I want to go where, I'm going to be a legend. I mean, everyone obviously was pointing the Mariners. Or look, San Francisco has a large Asian, and maybe like Jeff said too, maybe we're just being, we're totally stereotyping the guy. Why does he need to be in an Asian community? Why does he need to be in a Japanese community? Maybe Shohei doesn't want that. Maybe Shohei wants to assimilate. Like, we're automatically just assuming that, right? And that's the reason why we name these places. New York, Seattle, LA. I mean, shouldn't this just be really strictly a business and a baseball decision? Which is the team that gives me the chance to win the World Series? Because we saw what happened with the World Baseball Classic. He made it to the final. He had the whole world watching them. What is a better stage than that? He's not getting that with the Angels. He's not in the playoffs. He's not being showcased. So if you're Ohtani and his people, wouldn't you definitely, I want to go somewhere where I'm going to be in the playoffs, and then I want to go somewhere where I'm going to get paid, where people are going to pay me what I want.
Yeah. And that's a good point too. Like we're picking locations that have like a large, Japanese community or whatever. And yeah, I mean, I think wherever he goes, that community is going to follow him, right? There's going to be fans in those stands, right? Like, if you pick Texas, right, he ends up with the Texas Ranger, right? I mean, I'm sure it's going to be the same thing, right? So wherever he goes, it's, there's going to be that community following him. So, but I mean, like you said, that is interesting. I mean, I think he's going to pick, a team that's either in contention or right knocking on contention. And back to like, if the Dodgers win, like if they win this year, do the Dodgers really even need to go all out next on the offseason? Like next, right?
That's why I asked you.
They just won, right? Like, do we really need to go out again? Yeah.
I mean, I think that's going to be one of the questions. It's like, how many years do we want this guy? Because like what I completely forgot what Jeff had said too when he said, "Hey, for the first 3 years, this guy wasn't doing that, and he's just getting older." Right. So when you're paying these guys, you're paying these guys for what they did in the past. You're not, because we're seeing it now with current Dodger players, and we're going to see it, when Mookie's contract starts getting more into the later years. I mean, we're paying you for what you did in the past, not necessarily in the future. So I can understand. I think that's the only out for them. What you just said right there, babyface. If the Dodgers win the World Series this year, I think it takes off a lot of pressure from the Dodgers for them going after Ohtani. They're going to do the same thing that they always do with a free agent. We checked in on him. We did our due diligence. We made an effort, and it just goes back again to Friedman doesn't like losing. Friedman doesn't like to lose on deals. So, this offseason is just going to be nuts. But it was just really interesting to hear him say all these assumptions. Like, we know Ohtani, like this is what we were thinking. Like when Jeff said that it's like Ohtani, everybody thinks he just sits there and he's miserable because he's losing. Like Ohtani's having fun down in Anaheim. So if Artie ponies up and gives him the money, well, that's going to be the thing. It's just like, hey, dude, my life is good here. I'm going to get paid. I'm already getting the attention due. But I don't know. Go ahead.
And like you mentioned, Jeff said that Ohtani's the one that brought in that samurai helmet, right? And things super expensive, man. I'd be scared of like dropping that. Oh, hell thing,
yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Did you see what happened with the A's? I don't think it was real, but they had the Thor hammer and it broke the other day when they.
Oh, no, I didn't.
Yeah.
I didn't.
But the guy hit a home run and he came in the dugout and he like swung it and it fell off. I thought it was kind of reminiscent of what's going on with Thor here in LA, but but yeah, I would kind of be scared, to drop that thing if you paid like $800,000 on that helmet.
Was that a legitimate hammer or was that a plastic hammer?
I don't know. I don't know how, like, if it was like what kind of a toy hammer it is, but like, yeah, it just broke as soon as he swung it. So.
It's just going to be a very interesting series, right? Because especially this year. So I think you had mentioned it before. I think it's a given. He's not getting traded. And especially if the Angels continue to stay in it. They're only 4.5 behind the Rangers. And you said it yourself. How much longer can the Rangers sustain this? The Astros are the Astros, and we're going to see them fairly soon also at Dodger Stadium. So the Mariners are the ones that are disappointing in that division. I really thought the Mariners would be up there. So I think to a certain extent, I am a little surprised that the Angels are this competitive in that division. But it's for sure. And then what would you do? Like, what is a trade package that you would have to give up your whole farm system to get someone like Shohei Ohtani? And what sucks is the the Dodgers could completely use him right now. He's a starting pitcher. But then let me ask you this. Let's say we're living in a fantasy world and the Dodgers do pull off that trade for Shohei. What are you going to do with JD Martinez? JD Martinez is having a really good season for you. The Dodgers, the DH position is not a problem. Now, I know, hasn't Shohei played in the outfield?
Not. I don't think he might have played like one game or something with the Angels or two, but I don't think he's really been out there. But
because that would solve a lot of Dodgers problems right there. Yeah. You get Shohei, he solves a pitching need for you, and then he solves an outfield need for you.
Hypothetically, like say if the Dodgers did make a trade for Shohei, I think you'd probably have to give him a DH back, so you'd probably have to give him like JD Martinez back, right? I think that's how the only way that would work. But you're giving up probably, you have to give up like Bobby Miller, Gavin Stone, Landon Knack, all these guys, right? Maybe Sheen and the new guys coming up, right? Making the start. Yes. Question for you real quick. Do you think the Dodgers would go the route of what they've done previously in the short contracts, high annual
Yeah,
salary.
I think that's
with
exactly what they're going to do.
like a 2-3 year deal, $60-70 million a year, something like
I
that.
could see that. I could see them going 5 with a high average for 5, because that's what they did with Bryce Harper, didn't they?
Yeah,
Didn't they go 5? I could totally see them doing that.
Yeah,
I could totally see them going a short amount of years, but with a very high average. And Shohei, he's in his late 20s, right?
I believe so.
So, God, can you see how old he is? Because if let's say he's 28 years old, would you do this? Would you take a 4-year deal with a really high average and then test the market again at 32 and see if you could get another? Because technically 32 is what normally considered like the end of your prime, right? It's where Mike Trout is right now. But I think there's going to be another team, like you said. I think the Mets will come in and go, we'll give you the 12 years. We'll give you the 12 years, and we'll give you the $600 million. I mean, it's going to be good to be him. I mean, everybody, especially now that you have Cohen and you have the Mets, and especially with the season the Mets are having right now, Cohen's going to go all in. So it's really just going to be about, hey, Ohtani, do you want to go to New York? And I mean, in terms of legacy, I think it totally fits the narrative. He goes to New York, and if he wins with the Mets, it's like, I beat the Yankees, he's going to be the king of New York, right? But then again, it's like, if you go to the Mets and you don't win, it's the Yankees town. You're going to be, I guess that's what sucks for baseball, is like, you don't want him to go somewhere where he's going to be buried again. And it's just like, when do we see it? We only see him at an all-star game that's on a national level, because the guy's leading the American League in home runs right now. And he's a great base runner. I think that's so underappreciated. If you actually watch a game and you see him run the base pads, he's great. He's an exciting player. But to me, the only question, and it's the question that Friedman and the rest of those guys are going to have to ask themselves, is how much longer can he keep doing both? And if we're going to pay, we're really paying for him to do both. Okay, we're going to end the show on this cliffhanger here, Babyface. Let me ask you a question. Would you maybe consider converting him to a reliever? Or is that impossible? You can't have him be a reliever.
Do you want me to answer it today or on the next show?
Do you need time to think about it? Because if you need time to think about it, we can answer it on another.
Well, he says the cliffhanger, so let's leave for the next show.
Okay, I only say that because of what Jeff said, that relievers are basically starters that are not successful. So if Shohei is starting to show signs that he can't be a successful starter, do you completely shut down and say, all right, then you're not pitching anymore? Once you can't deliver as a starter, you're not going to pitch anymore, and you're just focused on hitting.
I'll answer it now, but I don't think you could convert him to a reliever, but I think that's still down the road. I think he's not to the point. He's still a very good pitcher, right? He's had what would we say, like a 3 ERA? Yeah. He's not Noah Syndergaard yet, so like he's still got.
There you have it, ladies and gentlemen. A cheer! We have to have at least one episode where we shit on Noah Syndergaard, and there you go.
Yeah, so he's got time.
Okay. Well, I'm glad you answered it, because, if we go to another episode, we're going to completely forget about it, and we're not going to answer it. So good call on your part. So that's going to do it for this episode of the Bleed Lows podcast. Yo ha sido su servidor, Juan Ramirez, with the reminder, make sure you subscribe to the podcast. Make sure you subscribe to the YouTube channel. Tell your friends. Do what the Armenians are doing. If you guys haven't heard the news, we are the #1 baseball podcast in Armenia. And you know how we got there? It's because the Armenians went and told everybody, you have to listen to the Bleed Lows podcast. So do the same here. Tell everyone, hey, you're a Dodger fan, listen to the Bleed Lows podcast.
And if you're in Armenia, please drop us a note. Tell us what you enjoy about the show so much so we can continue to do that for you guys. Absolutely.
We want to continue our dominance in Armenia, not like our brothers in Israel who have forgotten about us. We have not heard from our brothers in Israel. Anyways, yo ha sido su servidor Juan Ramírez. De parte de mi colega Babyface, nos vemos para la próxima. This episode of the Bleed Lows podcast has been brought to you by betonline.ag, where the game starts.